Greetings sailors and welcome to a view replay for warships. Now, as of course we have just had the Italian line go into full release, and there's all kinds of other test ships available at the moment as well. Naturally, I have chosen to instead look at a replay from one of the oldest cruiser lines in the game, the Aoba, the Tier 6 Japanese heavy cruiser. Now, there's a reason why I have been, for the last 15 minutes, humming the Captain Scarlet theme to myself, and that is because the player is, in fact, Captain White. In the show Captain Scarlet, there was, in fact, a Colonel White, but I don't know if... I think Colonel White was... I think White was just the position of whoever was in charge. I don't think Colonel White was ever Captain White, but that's just how my brain works, and I've obviously put way more thought into this than it even remotely deserves. Anyway, at least it makes choosing a title for this particular replay quite easy. Now, as you probably noted from the loading screen, this is horrible matchmaking. There are 3 tier 6s in each team, and Captain White is unlucky enough to be one of them. It's not all completely terrible news though. Sometimes being bottom tier isn't necessarily the worst thing. I mean, apart from anything else, if you manage to survive long enough to get a decent amount of damage done, and get defense flags, cap flags, whatever else will get you score, you get a bit of a bonus from being bottom tier, because if you're a lower tier ship doing damage to higher tier ships, that actually comes with a little XP boost to it. However, quite a lot of the time, enemy players will just look at you and see a, free kill, essentially, a squashy lower tier ship that maybe doesn't have that many hit points, that much armor, or that much range. And so they might decide to focus you down at the earliest possible opportunity. But occasionally the inverse is true as well. Sometimes you get players that will ignore you, because, hey, it's only a bottom tier ship, it's not that big of a threat, there are things I need to worry about more nearby. Now, that doesn't especially go for destroyers in particular, but for all other classes, yeah, sometimes being bottom tier will actually get you ignored longer and give you more of a window of opportunity to do damage without getting picked on. But it really comes down to whichever way individual enemy players are going to jump. And that's something you can absolutely never predict. It only takes one, tier 8 player in this particular scenario, for example, one of the tier 8 battleships or whatever, deciding, or even the carrier deciding that Captain White really must be the first to die, and then picking on him to the exclusion of all others to make Captain White's life utterly miserable. That was all a very long-winded way of saying sometimes it sucks to be bottom tier, but occasionally other players will decide to ignore you, in which case it can almost be an advantage. It's just utterly unpredictable, and so it's nice when it happens. And the reason why I have, gone on this little digression is because that's exactly what's going to happen for most of this particular match. And it's happened to me in games I've played myself. I think I've played some, or shown some replays of, I don't know, things like I'm sure I've done a Murmansk game or two, maybe some other tier 5, tier 6 cruisers, where I've just been ignored for long enough to actually rack up quite decent amounts of damage. And that kind of gives away what this match is going to be like, but there's more to it than that. It's not just this person gets ignored and gets to do a bunch of damage. No, it's actually going to have quite an interesting ending. I'll put it that way. I don't want to spoil too much. So he's racked up a bit of damage already. He's come over towards the middle. They did actually manage to cap A, but there are a fair few enemy ships around there, and although they have forced the enemy out of sea, they haven't actually managed to cap it yet. B, meanwhile, has been taken by the enemy, but there's not a lot around here at the moment, so this is not a bad place to relocate to, and he can perhaps get some damage on this Massachusetts, which is in range. And there's not a lot else at the moment. Possibly a destroyer. In fact, yes, there is that Hatsuharu, but the Massachusetts is definitely going to be the easier target to hit with these guns. So they're ignoring him for the time being. They've got other things to worry about. And so hopefully we can get some more fires out of this. And with the fire chance you have on the 8-inch Japanese shells, there is a fairly decent chance of it. This is definitely not the kind of fire setter that the Zhao can be, but it's not terrible for the tier. But it definitely is outclassed by the light cruisers just because they have the rate of fire and a much larger number of barrels to work with. Even going up a tier, you know, you get to the Myoko and you've gone from 6 to 10. That's a fairly significant increase in firepower. But for now, he's just got to make do with what he's got. And what he's got is proving to be at least decent enough. He is being targeted by somebody right now, though. We're not entirely sure who. That looks like it was the enemy Kutuzov. Okay, but they are fairly far away, so he's got plenty of time to dodge those incoming shells and actually is able to easily get unspotted for the time being, because again, another advantage of Japanese cruisers is they tend to have pretty good stealth. In fact, before the British cruisers came along, they had the best stealth of any cruisers for the most part. That's not going to last long, though. This Fantask is about to light him up again, and we now have ships pressing around that flank. We also have that Alabama in serious trouble, and they are also capping A. There really wasn't the ships required here to hold that against any kind of enemy push, and the enemy has pushed, and now that's left Captain White in a little bit of a tricky position, because that's a pair of Tier 8 battleships coming round here, I think. Unless I'm completely misremembering. There's that Bismarck, and I'm sure there's a Monarch somewhere as well, or am I completely making that up? I'm not sure. Now, he's not completely alone. There is a Baltimore here, and in theory a Bayern as well, but that Bayern is going to be AFK up until the point where they die. I'll tell you that now for nothing. So maybe this is somebody that looked at the matchmaking and just went, nope, I'm out. Which is not at all helpful to the team. Even the Bayern would have been able to do something in this matchmaking. It does have 15-inch guns after all, though not particularly reliable ones. But yeah, they just do nothing and never reconnect, or who knows. So they're out of it, and so that leaves Captain White in, yeah, a bit of a precarious situation, because now he's in a position where he is just about the only thing that can get targeted by these enemies pushing through A. I don't know if you noted, by the way, but his team has only just capped C, despite having forced the enemy team out of it some considerable time ago, so who knows. Now at this point the Fantask must be lighting up the Bayern, because they're all now picking on this AFK ship instead of Captain White, so that actually has kind of worked for him a little bit. He could be getting focused a lot harder here as a ship that's actively, you know, active and firing back, and instead they're going for the AFK ship, which poses absolutely no threat to anybody. To be fair to the enemy players, that ship could wake up at literally any point, of course, but generally speaking, you want to go for the ship that's actually fighting back rather than the one that poses no threat to you. Although depends on the ship, you know. If it's an AFK destroyer or something, you want to kill it quick to remove the risk that they'll wake up. But still, overall, it does just suck when you're a player down, because even if it's a bottom tier player, it can make all of the difference. It really can. So actually lands a hit with the Torps. They are fairly slow, of course, but 10 kilometers is a really useful range. It's just awkward making the drops sometimes, and Captain White is absolutely not shy about using them. He's also got his head on a bit of a swivel, so he's making sure to keep an eye on what's going on around him, especially what's going on in the middle. He doesn't want to get caught short by something popping through unexpectedly. But as it is, he seems fine to continue to just fire at this Bismarck. There goes the AFK Bayern. And, well, the Fantask, you know, does have dangerous torps, but chances are he would get some warning before the Fantask was able to drop them. Or, well, that is to say, the Fantask isn't that likely to be able to drop them stealth. The French destroyers don't do stealth torpedo dropping very well. It really depends how you build your ship, of course, but yeah, they are not great at it. So we got a bit of flooding out of that Bismarck. He's up to not that far off 100k damage already. I think I must have been making up the Monarch. Completely just, you know, fabricating out of whole cloth. I don't know where I got the Monarch from. There is an enemy battleship that's kind of popped up down now there on that flank, rather damaged turpits, so I think my memory was just supplying that there was going to be another battleship to the south at some point, and I just made one up, because of course I did. The flooding, by the way, or the cessation of flooding, was probably caused by the damage control party, and that's handy for Captain White because, well, now they've managed to pin a fire on this Bismarck instead, and that's going to burn, and if they can get more fires going, then the Bismarck might actually be in fairly serious trouble. But this is where that low overall volume of fire is going to work against him a little bit. It also appears to be a secondary build Bismarck, and oh, there we go, the first real damage he's taken all game. He's just within that, what, 11.3 kilometre max range he can get, so he needs to pull away a little bit. It's not going to be really a short-term worry, but if he's getting pelted long enough, in fact actually gets a gun damaged there by one of those secondary hits, he really doesn't want to hang around here. So he's putting a little more distance between them, and while all this has been happening, his team's actually pushed and done a bit more about the middle, but it's been at the cost of some ships. And the enemy team having the 2 cap advantage for a little while has given them a not a cap point, a victory point advantage that isn't insurmountable. It's far from insurmountable, but it does give the enemy team the momentum, as it were, the impetus. They just have to knock out some more ships to keep that lead, even if they lose some ships themselves. But they also have to maybe try and take that middle cap back before too long. And if they're a bit, you know, if they rush in a bit too hastily doing that, then yeah, that could be obviously a disadvantage for them. It could be a real millstone around their necks. I don't know quite what I'm trying to get at there, but you know what I mean. They might all rush in and die horribly. That's not going to be the case, though. It does just look like the Richelieu that's contesting. So, yeah, sped this bit up because there isn't a lot happening here for Captain White. But in fact, there wasn't really a lot I could cut out of this one. I don't think I edited out anything except the first, like, 2 minutes, roughly. And then I've left some bits in, but sped up just so you can keep an eye on what's going on with the rest of the team. So yeah, there's a bit of a mutual annihilation there with the battleships on that flank. The Fantask is still around. I think there was a North Carolina elsewhere that went down. So both ships, both teams have been heavily bleeding ships. But the bad news is the enemy team has managed to retain that victory point advantage. It's a narrow margin, though. We just need to stop losing ships and stop this Richelieu from capping. Now, if this game hadn't had a carrier in play, well, who knows how it might have gone a bit differently. But as it is, there are carriers in play, so anyone that's running around low health at this point, and presumably having taken some damage, maybe lost some AA mounts, so therefore, you know, it's less effective. They're in serious peril of being damaged and taken out. One of the most threatening remaining enemy ships, though, that Richelieu, gets killed very nicely by, well, combined efforts, but the fact that Captain White got multiple fires there certainly helped out a lot. And he's now up to 138,000 hit points, which is not half bad going at all. Talking of carriers, their carrier seems to have been focused on, I guess, trying to do damage. Maybe a bit of time spent trying to spot this Fantask, either around now or perhaps even earlier in the match, would have been a useful endeavour. But as it is, well, we're really starting to run out of time now. We really are. And the Fantask obviously can outrun an Aoba without that much difficulty. So it does kind of come down to the carrier to try and provide some spotting. There are some other useful things going on though. The Kutuzov we know is extremely low health. The Fantask we know is in the cap circle. And the enemy carrier, in an attempt presumably to shorten their round trips with the strike squadrons that they've got, they've steamed up into the middle. So that's now put them within really, easily within range of Captain White's guns. But here's where that lack of volume of fire overall is going to become a little bit of an issue. He's just not going to be able to put out the damage quick enough. He does, however, have those torpedoes. And as they're Japanese torpedoes, if he can land, 3 or 4? I think he could easily finish off that Enterprise. Is it Enterprise? Yes, it is an Enterprise. So the Fantask's still alive, the Kutuzov is still alive, the Megami is now dead, unfortunately, and he's under attack from planes. He doesn't have to worry about the Fantask's torps from that range, but the Kutuzov's popped up on the other side. However, a thing is about to happen, which is kind of hilarious. Yeah! Close quarters expert in an Aoba. So the torps are out. The Fantask is dead. The Shikaku gets the kill with rocket planes. And come on! Come on! No! Oh my word, no! 2 of the torps hit and I think registered the damage. But the final 2 didn't. And the final 2 would have been enough to kill that Enterprise. So, like a half second more, or maybe even less than that, just enough time for the torps to kill that Enterprise would have won this game. And instead, it really did come down to that very last second. So what I was saying earlier about the Bayern being in play, maybe having making a difference, even if they hadn't done that much, if they'd done a few thousand damage here and there to some enemy ships that then took less time to kill by other allied ships or by Captain White themselves, just a couple of seconds could have made a difference. But as it was, it really came down to the wire, and the enemy team won on a technicality. They really did. I mean, they held that points lead, and that was what mattered in the end. But, that was so close. That had to be absolutely galling when it came down to just that split second when you know you have it, and yet you are denied by the timer. So, that's it for this replay. I am going to actually next up let me know in the comments, actually. I've been poked that I don't engage enough. So I'm going to give that a go. Would you prefer to see a look at the Italian cruisers, or are you more interested in me looking at some of the work-in-progress ships that we have at the moment, like the Odin or the Mainz or the British heavy cruisers? We've got a couple of those to play with as well. So yeah, leave a comment and give me a general sense of the kind of things you would be interested in seeing more. So that's it for this replay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath it. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.